Hello and welcome to the 384th episode of The Crate and Crowbar, a podcast not only about PC gaming, it's about gaming in all kinds of things. On the date that we're recording this, it is Thursday the 28th of October. I'm Alex Wiltshire and tonight I'm joined by Marsh Davies.
Hello.
Hello, Marsh. Hey, you got some news.
I do, yes.
You've done a thing.
I did a thing. It wasn't a PC gaming thing, but it was a gaming thing. And under the new rules, under the new regime, it's no longer illegal. You no longer get put in prison for mentioning games.
That's why you don't live in the UK anymore. You had to be, we ran you out of this country.
Yeah, I had to escape the jurisdiction so my crimes would go unpunished. I released a standalone role-playing mini campaign called Teeth, Stranger and Stranger.
So is it about some strange teeth?
Yeah, and not about colons. That was indication of the grammar used. Just Teeth, Stranger and Stranger. It's part of our ongoing Teeth universe of role-playing products.
You make it sound so good.
I know. Everybody loves a product. You play a bunch of bumpkins, basically, just fucking pig-ignorant yokel motherfuckers, which is why when you play tested it, you came so naturally to the role, Alex.
I mean, I could barely tell the difference between it and my normal life.
Well, yes, especially as the center point of it is that you horribly mutate into some cursed monstrosity as you travel a benighted corner of 18th century England in the hopes of finding something to fix your village and save it from a monster. And that is a tale told straight from your own experience.
It just keeps happening to me every place I go. Like the littlest hobo of 18th century yokels. That's what I am.
Well, actually, I described it on Twitter as last of the summer wine meets annihilation.
See, that is basically it. Like it is weird stuff happening on the Yorkshire moors. I can confirm that Stranger and Stranger, the prototype was really good. We, a small band of yokels, succeeded in dealing with. No, we didn't. We did not succeed in dealing with the monster, but it was good even though. And we had some weird adventures on the way. I think. Yeah. What did I get? I got the mutation. So as you go along, you get mutations, don't you? And I got a mutation which no, you got a mutation where you had to speak like a baby.
I didn't, but somebody did. We've actually removed that or toned it down. Okay. We thought it was the mutation was called baby, and you had to refer to yourself in the third person as baby, and we felt it was a bit too much of an imposition on a character who might have already had some other aspirations to role playing, and then suddenly get hijacked. Basically,
it did undermine everything that Dan did in the game from that point on.
Yeah, well, we still have some form of it. So you begin to de-age worryingly and need milk at regular intervals. But otherwise, it doesn't impose too much of a burden on your role playing character. But the idea is that you lean into these mutations and you think about how your character might react to suddenly growing horrendous neck finger, or having their limbs fused together into leathery lumps, and or have a rasping cavern within your belly that can suck in an entire horse. It's maybe not terribly well balanced, but it's a lot of fun. And it's the can I just say a bit about exactly what this is and why we did it at all? So we've released, this is the third standalone module we've released in in the run up to launching this full RPG setting called Teeth. And the idea behind it was to sort of slowly introduce the rules of the setting, which is based on the Forged in the Dark rule set. And we wanted to introduce those across a series of games that would get steadily more sort of in-depth as you go. So the first one released was called Night of the Hogmen. I keep on referring to we. This is myself and Jim Rossignol, I should clarify. But in Night of the Hogmen, it was this very kind of pick up and play, very rapid fire adventure, and you sort of get barreled through a series of gruesome choices, basically, as you flee a tidal wave of mutant pigs And I think experienced role players would probably get some chuckles out of it, but really it was meant so that you could drop it in the lap of somebody who'd never role played before or never played anything other than D&D before, and they would get up to speed and have a good time with it pretty quickly. And the second one was Blood Cotillion, which is a bit more complicated. It plays a bit like a sort of Dishonored level, set in a Jane Austen spoof, in that you're all assassins and you're disguised as young noble ladies on the hunt for husbands, and you've infiltrated this society ball to root out the cultists who are hosting it. And it's more elaborate and it's more freeform than Hogmen, but it is like when I say Dishonored, I mean that I was like consciously trying to replicate that sort of rich, dense, singular environment you get in those games, or in Hitman, where you've got a bunch of objectives that you complete in any manner you see fit, and there's like the environment is seeded with loads of juicy opportunities and details and things that might hinder or help you, but it's still in this kind of contained space and takes place across a limited expanse of time. So with the third one, we wanted to open it up much more and make it much more of a kind of recognizable RPG campaign. So that you're following like a quest line across a series of sessions, and you have all the kind of greater freedoms that implies. But one of the things that means is that you need, and gives us the opportunity to introduce rules for, say, like phases of play and downtime, and you need mechanics that allow you to recover from injury or stress. And we're in, all of these things will be things that you see in the later game as well. And so this is sort of like designed to onboard you with all of those things by giving you this sort of introduction, which is shows you all of these things in turn and then sets you free, essentially, to mutate horribly. And by the end of it all, I think we have actually ended up building this sort of neat runway that somebody could use to onboard completely new players, or D&D players, to the Forged in the Dark rule set that we're going with. And I think that's useful. Partly, because I don't know how you feel about this, because you've played a lot of D&D as well, and I do love D&D, and it's absolutely massive as a phenomenon. But it is this very crunchy, quite number heavy, complicated, weighty thing. And I think D&D players sort of like just stick kind of religiously with D&D because they think there'll be this equivalent cost to learning other systems, and there isn't necessarily. Like the Forged in the Dark rule set is really extraordinarily lightweight by comparison, and it offers a very different kind of role playing to D&D, which is sort of like more freeform. It's faster. It's more interested in the fun of it than in a simulation of what happens when a +5 scimitar hits a level 2 chainmail pauldron or whatever. And I like that sort of crunchy granular stuff, but I think if you de-emphasize that simulatory stuff, you open up to a whole new world of sort of much more lively and engaged and narrative-led role playing. And I think it might not be for you, but people who've only played D&D are definitely missing out on that. And I think, this is our games are a great place to start, Alex.
Yeah, I think Forged in the Dark is a sort of a really. I mean, I've really enjoyed the game that kind of the Forged in the Dark system was forged in Blades in the Dark, and Blades in the Dark. I think that a D&D player would probably be completely flummoxed by the fact that a session is made up of two fundamental phases: downtime, which is completely player-led, and the player says, I'm going to go to the pub, I'm going to get really drunk, and that's going to sort out various stats of mine. And then the other phase is doing a heist or a robbery or a murder, or it could be any one of a number of nefarious things, but the lead up to the heist is like this, what's your plan for getting in, and you just say the plan, and the DM just decides whether does this sound hard or does this sound easy. Roll a dice, and then were you successful or were there problems? And I think that D&D players might be very confused about the fact that they didn't lead into the kind of the kickoff of the main dish, and but that kind of idea of just cutting out any kind of just preamble or anything that isn't just the fun bit. So, for instance, you can say, "Hey, I want to kill this guy." Okay, you can do this in one roll if you like. As long as you can give a good enough method of killing this person with credible tools that you have to hand, roll that dice, you're successful, or you were successful and bad things also happened. And that's basically everything is successful in the game as well. And I think that these are all things that D&D players would be really kind of like, oh, this doesn't make sense. And it's too free. And why is everything going so well and also so badly all the time? It's the kind of system that it allows disaster to happen at all times. And I think going into video game stuff, like you and I, Marsh, have had lots of conversations about, wouldn't it be so good if this stealth game, particularly stealth games, could support things going wrong better, so you don't always want to reload. And Blades in the Dark, its solutions don't map to video games at all, but it addresses the same problem of how do you make players think on their feet all the time, make them face disaster, but always keep them feeling powerful, always keep them feeling engaged, and always keep them feeling hopeful.
Yeah.
And that is like everything that I want to be solved with stealth games, strategy games, all these video games.
I did spend some time trying to work out how you would apply something like the Forged in the Dark dice rolls to turn-based strategy games, because like you say, the thing about those dice rolls is that it's not about sort of like dealing damage above an armor level. It is kind of, you're rolling to see your success or failure using a dice pool, and you have outright success if you roll a 6, and then 4 to 5 success but with a complication, and then 1 to 3 is various levels of disaster. But that with a complication is such a beautiful kind of elegant idea, because it builds, how they talk about the success of improvisational comedy is to go yes and, that's what the dramatists always bang on about, and that is yes and, but as a kind of formalized mechanic, because not only have you succeeded, but then there's this other thing which creates which makes the situation continuously dynamic. Like everything is always shifting and changing, and there are new things to react to. There's always going to be new prompts from the GM that will, you're never going to be just in a slugfest with somebody else, dealing a bit of damage. It's their turn, they deal a bit of damage to you. Who can win the maths in the long term? It's never that. It's always shifting.
Although if you want to, you can have that scenario though, and that's like the kind of the hallmark of the flexibility of the system. So you could have a huge sort of boss.
Oh yeah, you can have clocks, which
you could stretch it out, and you could model all that if you want to. But by and large, if you're fighting grunts, like do you sort them out? Yep, sorted. Right, on to the next. It's fun.
Yeah,
it's good, and and that means that you can have these mutations which super complicate things but also offer opportunities. I seem to remember that one of our party gained like a hole in their chest, and then they used the hole in their chest to carry something, hide something.
Yeah, I think we stored equipment in there for a while.
Yeah. It's like, of course, why the hell not? But it just means that everything can be really ramped up and ridiculous without it ever feeling out of control, and or kind of chaotic. It's chaotic in the best way. It's sort of chaotic in a way that you can steer and enjoy.
And if that sounds good to you, then you can buy it. You can buy the latest one for a mere $10 on itch, or you can buy the previous one for a reduced price of merely $3.50 on a Halloween sale. And the first game, Hogmen, is actually free, so you can just check it out, play it.
Yeah, And what Marsh isn't also indicating is the fact that it is lush with his disgusting art. It's lovely. It really is. Looks
Thanks,
real
man.
good. You'd never think that it was made by such people as Marsh and Jim. You'd think that it was made by proper people.
What have you been playing, Alex?
Well, I wanted to tell you something first about something I came across, and this has been hitting the news because it's just so ridiculous and yet so just real. It also carries on a conversation that Chris and I had in the last Game Pod a couple of weeks ago about because Timothy Chalamet, a famous man who I'd not heard of before, Chris said that he was filming Wonka in our fair city of Bath.
Oh, yeah.
Timothy Chalamet is a revelation has come forth about Timothy Chalamet's questionable gaming past, because it's come to light as identified by various fan Instagram accounts that Timothy Chalamet had an Xbox 360 modding YouTube channel when he was in his early teens.
See, I saw a tweet about this, but I assumed it was nonsense. Is this true? Is it? It got confirmed.
It is completely true. It's been confirmed. Somebody asked him in a press junket, presumably for June. It was definitely for June. So like he's having to be all serious, being Paul Atreides, and like, yeah. So did you have a YouTube channel? Yes, he did. He confirmed it completely. He said that he made $30 because he was selling them as well. I want to give you a quote from his first video. In which he showed off his Red Tiger Xbox 360 controller. It's this grotesque controller with a kind of black and red striped tiger pattern that he's painted on it the previous day, and then was to sell on to a client, presumably a friend, the next day. But he covered it anyway. At the start of his video, Timothy Chalamet, one of the most hotly anticipated, wanted, hot actors at the moment, said, "What's good, YouTube? This is modded controller 360 with the controller of the week. Here's Red Tiger. Started yesterday, finished it today. It looks nice. It looks sexy." I love that. I think that I do. I mean, there's lots to be horrified about the fact that growing up today is horrifically public. But it's also rather wonderful that somebody who's hit the public consciousness in a way that even I have become aware of them within the last 2 weeks has had this kind of this shameful upbringing and this interest in modding 360 controllers. I think it's fucking marvelous, and I have so much respect for him.
Wow. You really can't escape your past on the internet, can you? How was he identified initially? Was his face in those videos? Or
sort of, but you can see a resemblance with acting reels and things that he's acted in at the time. I think he was in adverts and stuff at that age. There's a resemblance, but you couldn't prove it. There's this amazing Vice article, which we'll link to in the show notes, in which they do lots of comparing mats on the floor in his gaming room and kind of scars on his knuckles and things like that between this source and that source. And they're fairly sure, and with the kicker at the end that the couple of days later or a few hours after the article went up, it was fully confirmed kind of in an interview. It's just it's the most ridiculous piece of kind of sleuthing that is so necessary as well.
So he was presumably picked for the role of June because he had a lot of experience putting his hand into boxes.
That's good. Yes.
There's probably some better pun in there, but I can't come up with it.
Probably is.
I saw Dune. Lots of people have seen Dune. We're going to talk about Dune on a podcast coming to you soon.
What would you score it out of 14 before that?
Oh, I'm not going to give away. Not going to give away the goods, Alex. Not yet.
All right, tell me. Oh, all right, fine. I haven't seen it yet. Fine. You will though. Please tell me what you've been playing.
Oh, okay. Oh, I can tell you. Yeah, I've been playing Inscryption.
Inscryption.
Yeah,
That's the weird card game.
it
I
is.
played a bit of that.
What did you make of the little bit that you played, Alex?
So I've played maybe 45 minutes or so, and it was feeling incredibly promising.
Mm.
I played and I've forgotten his name. Oh
Daniel
God, I've
Mullins?
forgotten his Daniel Mullins. I played a couple of his games before. I played the Pony one,
Pony Island.
Pony Island, and I played one where it's sort of side on, and you're in this kind of hotel,
Don't remember that one.
and yeah,
Sorry.
but so Pony Express, Pony
Island.
the Pony one,
Yes.
was, kind of like, oh, out of the blue, kind of, whoa, here's a crazy thing. Hey, look at it's like all multi-textual, and like we're delving into the very stuff of games, and I don't know what's happening next. The one set in the hotel-y thing that's side on is very much, I'm going to make a game that's about games, because all of the characters you play are very much gaming characters. And I'm really, really bored of games. And in each of the game characters, you kind of go into the game they came from, and you play this kind of. So one of them is like a sort of pixely kind of very pixel kind of platformer, and another one is the turn-based strategy. But like the story plays out across these things, and and it's impressive that he's managed to make these sort of game types, and they're all playable more or less. But I'm really bored of the point of using games to talk about stuff, outside of the text, and that text simply to be game. I'm not making sense, but let's not just mull over what games are. Anyway, Inscryption.
Well,
it was
it's
feeling
interesting.
really promising.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of sympathise with you. I think my sympathy for that stuff is quite case by case. Like, I don't mind games which are discursive of the medium of games. I don't mind games that are in some way kind
That's
of
a very elegant way of saying it. Why didn't you mince your words around like I did? It's as if you're smarter and better at talking than me.
Oh, Alex, poor little bumpkin, littlest hobo. So I don't mind that stuff per se, and I don't mind stuff that's metatextual. But I think you and I probably share a little bit of antipathy about games which go, oh, you remember JRPGs? This is a bit like a JRPG. Well, JRPG's a bit shoddy in certain ways, and use that as a sort of way of excusing the fact that they are still the games of today, just as shoddy as the JRPGs they're referencing. I don't when reference is used as a way of sort of just parceling up stuff and hanging a lampshade on things that are kooky or clumsy, my attention span drifts, I have to say, at that point.
Yes.
But
Inscryption seemed really tightly focused, and that's what I was excited about, while also having all this mad kind of, where the fuck's it going next? We better explain what this game actually is.
I do, yes. Okay. It's a creepy looking deck building battler in which you amass animal themed cards and you pit them against the deck of a stranger who is shrouded in darkness and peers out of you from the dark with these googly eyes. And that darkness and the table before you are contextualized as being physical objects within a spooky cabin. And you are essentially being forced to play cards under threat of death. And you can get up from the table and you can walk around the cabin. And around the cabin are these sort of puzzles which you can, interact with and solve, and they sort of affect the kind of deck that you can build. The puzzles there are they're the sort of puzzles you get in games like The Room, for example. I saw somebody on Twitter describe Inscryption as a card game inside an escape room, and that is that's the setup and that's the pitch. And because it is by Daniel Mullins, principally anyway. I think there's another collaborator at least who's involved. And just to sort of explain, Pony Island, this preceding game, is sort of lo-fi arcade game, but you become aware that the game is being progressively corrupted by a malevolent force. And Inscryption also sort of goes beyond the boundaries of its premise in that sort of metafictional way. I won't spoil anything of the nature of that stuff, but I do want to talk about the mechanics of the initial card game and that sort of context that it's presented in. And I do actually like the game a lot. I do have some sort of qualms with it, particularly as it gets to the stuff that I don't want to spoil, and so that makes it very difficult to criticize because I can't tip my hand as to exactly why I find that stuff less impressive. But the card game that initially presents you with, even though it is ultimately superseded by the sort of larger meta fiction that it exists in, is actually a really kind of robust card game in itself, and up to a point, that is. So the idea is that you play cards into a row of 4 spaces, as per many card battlers, and then the opponent places cards in a row opposite, and your cards attack the opponent's cards in the row directly in front of them, and they have their own health pools. But if there's no card in front of them, or they deal excess damage on top of the health of the opposing card, they deal damage to the opponent themselves. And this is represented, I don't know if this is unique in card battles, actually. I mean, you've played a lot more than I do, but it's represented by a weighing scale. And I think it's just a brilliantly smart and intuitive analogy. And I don't know why more card games haven't thought of it before, but every time you damage the opponent, weights are added to their side of the scale. And every time they damage you, weights are added to yours. And overall, you actually only need, I think it's 5 clean points of damage to tip the scale completely and win. And it's a really small margin in which for success or loss to exist. But I think it's an interesting design choice. I think it's intended actually to restrict the sort of it obviously restricts the length of the rounds, but I think it's also designed to sort of restrict to some extent the strategic depth of that game. As is the restriction to only 4 cards on the table. You can imagine if you had 8 cards, the number of strategic possibilities you would have would suddenly become so much larger. And if you had a larger amount of damage that you could take, suddenly it'd be a lot sort of richer. It'd have to rejig a lot of the rules, but it would be kind of a much deeper game on the kind of scale that maybe Magic the Gathering is. But they've made the choice not to be that. And I think that's fine and interesting. It makes it kind of a much more concise and pared down and precise game, I think. But just to get into the sort of the mechanics of the cards a little bit, most cards cost something to play. And the resources are blood or bones. And the trick of the game is to figure out how to earn them by sacrificing the cards that are currently in play. And the game tries to make you feel pretty bad about this because essentially you're killing beautiful woodland animals. And you're attempting to kill, so you're playing cards in sequence to kill them in sequence in order to kind of maximize resources and play the best cards that deal the most damage or have particular effects which will be advantageous in a given scenario. And at the start of a match, you dealt a few random cards from your deck and a squirrel card. And squirrels cost nothing to play. They don't attack at all. They only have 1 health point. So you can use them to soak up a single point of incoming damage. But most of the time, what you're going to want to do with them is to kill them with your own hands, to sacrifice them, to earn a single drop of blood that will then let you play something else. And also when they die, they also generate, when anything dies, in fact, whether it's by sacrifice or because another card has killed it, it generates a bone. And the difference between these 2 resources is really interesting because you have bones just amass, basically, in a pool. But sacrifices can only be initiated when you have chosen the card that you want to play after you sacrificed it. So, for example, you have 2 squirrels on the board. You can't just kill them and bank the blood. You have to select the wolf card that you're going to play and then earn the necessary blood by stabbing the squirrels to death. And this is actually a really significant and clever restraint and a source of a lot of the tension in the game, that you can only play most cards if you're willing to sacrifice cards that are currently in play. And then on the subsequent turn, you can pick a card from your deck or a squirrel card and add it to your hand. And the fact that it's so hard to choose often is what is really interesting about the game. Is that?
Yeah.
Have I explained the basics?
Yeah, I mean the other side is that you're painfully limited by the fact that you've only got 4. I mean, as far as, I mean, I don't know if it changes later on, but there's 4 slots in which you can place your cards. So you're agonizing over, I just need more space so I can put something down so I can sacrifice it, because I don't want to sacrifice that one. It's those kind of horrible questions.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, if you had more spaces to play, you would be throwing down sacrificial cheap cards all the time. And that choice would become a lot easier. But because you're constrained, you do have to kill cards that are really useful to you.
Yeah.
On the off
and once
chance
you've killed a card, it's gone as well. Like you don't get redraws. It goes into a discard, doesn't it? And you don't get it back.
You do get it back for successive games. And all of this, sorry, I should say that all of these card games are happening on this table in front of this threatening presence. But he's also sort of in a sort of interstitial level of game. He has a map, like an overworld map, that you're like a little model of you is traveling along, and that is also sort of like the way that you progress. That's sort of your run. So it is almost roguelike. You have the individual games themselves. They exist within a sort of like roguelike run of challenges, which have, which also deal you new cards and also throw bosses at you and other things. And then you have this other layer of game, which is sort of beyond the table. But what's interesting, so that's like the basics.
That's the good news. And this is the game that I've been playing so far.
Yeah. And so on top of that, and this is where it becomes really interesting, is that the game allows you to create wildly imbalanced decks, and not just using the base cards. One of the central mechanics of that sort of that mid-level game, the sort of roguelike run, is that you can destroy cards and rip from them one of their powers and imbue another card with it. And on top of that, you have these things called totems, which apply certain rules to your cards in a blanket way on a map. And by combining these things, you can create these kind of really lavish chain reactions, which essentially break the game. Like, I had a stink bug, which I'd imbued with the Deathless trait. It cost me 2 bones to play. And I have a totem, which means that every time I play an insect card, like the stink bug, I get another card in my hand, an ant, in fact. And as long as I could afford those 2 bones to play the stink bug initially, it meant that I could basically just endlessly sacrifice the stink bug, play an ant, then play the stink bug, sacrifice it, play an ant, play the stink bug, sacrifice it, until I had a full row of ants in on the table. And ants, their attack power is equal to the number of ants on the board. So I essentially, 4 times 4 had an attack power of 16. And because I could infinitely and instantly replenish fallen ants and the various other mechanics that are thrown at you, the opponent can occasionally steal your cards and other things like this. Because ants individually are fairly weak, it didn't really matter. And so I was basically unstoppable for that run and powered through like the 3 later sections of the map in a really anticlimactic manner. And that is like one of the less exploity builds that you can create. Tom Francis is not just a master of stealth, obviously, a master of cards as well. And he's described to me just things that sound crazy OP. And obviously the reason that I like a good cheese, and the fact that I could basically make my own out of parts is really fucking cool. But I don't know if that makes the card game good, or whether all of that stuff is just in service to this meta level that you're reaching.
So is the game acknowledging? But this might be a spoiler, but you know, so sort of let's not talk about this. But is the game acknowledging you doing these exploitative tactics, and you know, is it reveling in the fact that you become OP?
Yes, yes, to some extent. And I think that it's good that it acknowledges it. Like, I mean, it also acknowledges it in reverse, in that your opponent who's setting this challenge for you, this mysterious, menacing creature in the cabin, they're also cheating. And like that, I mean, are they? They're not really cheating in the context of the game. They're introducing new rules, but you know, the way it's contextualized is that they are being unfair and cheating. And so it's kind of okay that you're fucking them up in a similar kind of underhand way, and they're actually impressed by that as well. And so I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
But
Oh.
At times, like, I think that stuff feels very exciting, and at other times I feel like that is sometimes used as cover for mechanics that might not work if this was a separate card game, or were in balance if it was a separate card game. And it doesn't always explain itself very well, I think, and I think it tries to get away with that by being all mysterious and shit. Um, but like, there's no real reason not to explain how overspill damage works, you know, properly. And there's just some things that are later in the game which just feel very kind of anticlimactic or clumsy or fussy or opaque. And it's kind of hard to criticize this stuff because, as I've said, it exists in part of the games that would be a spoiler even to kind of allude to. But the base card game in Inscryption is definitely the best part about it. And I found a lot less to like about the larger aims of the game. I think that it's not just the aims, but also the execution, I think, is actually a bit shonky in those later parts. To the extent that, like, say, a choice of presentational style just makes stuff illegible. And you know, I mean, maybe you can second guess it by saying, oh, maybe this failure is acceptable because it's housed within a meta narrative where the quality of the game is not necessarily the responsibility of the real life game designer, but within the fiction. But, you know, I don't know how I can get away with that. Like, it's the JRPG thing again, where it's, you know, like, hey, remember JRPGs and how much they fucking suck? And you're like, yes, I hate them. Sorry. And it's not quite as bad as that, but I think, you know, it feels like Inscryption wants it both ways. It wants you to engage with those mechanics of the card game on their own terms, and there is enough substance there to do that. But then when it fumbles or fluffs something, I don't feel like it gets away with distancing itself, you know, from those fuck ups with some arch metafictional device. But yeah, I'm really interested to see where you feel it goes. And how you feel about the way it goes, and we'll have to talk offline about that.
We'll do that, yeah.
Because I think there's a value to just being the delight and surprise of a game which does unexpected things. You know, I think that's good.
Yeah, and it's really good at hinting at that stuff without actually revealing the nature of it. I mean, you kind of get a sense of it, I suppose. But yeah, like, where the hell is this going to go next?
What have you been playing, Alex?
Well, I've also been playing. Well, you know what I've been playing, or at least you know the name of the thing you've been playing, and you've read a description.
You've been playing Rift Wizard, a tough as nails fantasy roguelike.
I don't know why I did it in that voice. It looks a little bit.
No, it sounds terrible.
It looks a little bit hard work. From just, well, that's my prejudice is based on the screenshots. That there's absolutely no substance to that opinion whatsoever.
So I think that anyone looking at the Steam page for Rift Wizard could be excused for wanting to run away from it, because it's you see the word roguelike and you see that it's pixel kind of graphics with kind of like these colorful kind of icon, low res kind of characters, and you think, oh god, it's like NetHack or something like that, and it's tough as nails. Oh Christ, it's really fucking great. It's really good. And it's much better, I would say. It's basically a wizard, build your own wizard simulator. It's not a simulator of building a wizard. you build a wizard, and then you get to go take your wizard into a simulator in which you just beat up loads of monsters. That's what you do. It's basically well, I'm sure we've talked about this game before on the pod, even though it is not a PC game, but now we're allowed to talk about it in more detail. Hoplite, you know Hoplite, don't you, Marsh?
I love that game.
It's a lot like Hoplite, but a lot more chaotic, in the sense that it's a turn-based, and every move, you're thinking quite hard about what you're going to do on that move to do as much damage as you can, to kill as much as you can in order to just fucking survive the next turn, and then the next and the next. But it is not about balletic, elegant, sort of smart puzzle solving, which is what Hoplite is about. Hoplite, by the way, is plays out on a hex grid, and you are a ancient a Greek warrior. You have a shield with which you can bash enemies away. You have a spear which you can either stab enemies, you can kind of or you can throw it and to kill enemies. And you, on every level, you get more and more enemies coming at you. Some of them are ranged, some of them are melee, some of them throw bombs at you. And the sense you can jump in the game in it, expending energy. I think there's another move as well. I can't remember. But anyway, you feel like a real warrior. It's incredible. You kind of see the enemy in front of you, think, right, I'm going to do a side dodge across the enemy, and that's going to kill them because you've used your spear as a sort of like stab across them. I'm then going to jump forward into another one and stab the enemy. You've upgraded your spear so that it now stabs through 2 enemies, and they're 2 ranked behind them. And then you're going to shield bash somebody out of into the path of a bomb that's been put behind you, and then you're going to throw your spear at someone else, and you just look back at what you just did and you think, I feel fucking badass. And it's just a turn-based thing, and Hoplite is fucking awesome. It's on Android and iOS, and it is really good. Rift Wizard even uses really similar sound effects. I'm sure its creator, whose name is Dylan White, has been inspired in some way with Rift Wizard. But Rift Wizard is bananas because you are a wizard and you are creating your wizards. You're choosing all their spells, your wizard spells, from a menu of 135 different spells, and that's across 16 schools of magic. So you're looking at kind of arcane, which is like sort of magic missile style things, fireballs, lightning, raising things from the dead, poisoning stuff, all the magics. And there are also skills you'll be putting on, which are sort of permanent effects that you're kind of, that play out from turn to turn. And there are the upgrades that you get at these kind of shrines and things that you'll visit along the way. And your object is to play, how many levels is it? Sort of 25 levels. And at the end of them, there's a bad wizard called Mordred, and you're going to kill Mordred. I have not got to that level. I've got to about level 10 or 11 now. And before dying. And it's some really interesting things about it. So most roguelikes are based on the idea that the things that you'll do during a run are going to be at the mercy of what came up randomly along the way. And if you're an experienced player, you'll just know the build you're going to go for. Okay, I've been given this such and such upgrade. Okay, I'm going to do this build. But you're at the mercy of the seed that you're on for that run. In this one, lots of things are consistent, so you can always just try out the same build over and over again if you want to. There are some elements that will steer you along a little bit. So one of the important things is that, I mean, the object of each level is just to kill everything, same as Hoplite. Once you've killed everything, there will be I think it's always 3 experience point, or like sort of SP, they're called. It's basically a currency for buying new spells and skills. And you will have 3 rifts that will open. And these rifts, you mouse over it and you can see where they'll take you, and you'll get a little sort of rundown of the kinds of enemies that are on that level, the enemies you find on level, and any upgrades or special things that you'll find there too. And items you might find as well, mana potions, health potions, that kind of thing. So and some of the shrines that you'll find along the way. So, for example, a fire shrine, that will reduce the cost of all spells and fire-based spells and skills, which, given that you're only picking up 3 kind of currency, 3 SP per level, means that you're going to be opening yourself to buying more stuff in the fire school of magic. So that might influence the kind of build you're going on, but not so much that you will kind of, that by not taking advantage of the flame thing, that you're kind of at any particular disadvantage. So you can try out the same thing over and over again. That was a danger for someone like me, because I got really stuck into trying to create lots of minions. There are various ways of doing this. The first build that I tried involved using Deathbolt. So there are maybe about 6 spells which only cost 1 SP, and you start a run with 1 SP. A fireball, electric, lightning bolt, and Deathbolt. And Deathbolt does damage. If it kills an enemy, a living enemy, it turns that enemy into a skeleton, which has the enemy's health value and fights on for you. And I thought, those are the maths that I like, because you're doing damage in order to gain things that will do more damage for me, and also tank for me, like take hits that would otherwise be, distract enemies and that kind of thing. Like, there is nothing that obviously it's the best spell. So I went for it. Believe it or not, the game is well balanced enough that my back of the envelope maths did not really work out, and I kept dying. But the idea of just creating a build with lots of minions kind of started to, and there are loads of synergies and things between skills and things, but I kept just finding that it was so difficult to kill enough stuff to get enough skeletons that would last long enough. There are ways of upgrading their, making sure that they have more health or are able to recoup health over turns. It wasn't really working. So then I tried another starter spell called Wolf, and this one just summons a wolf. It's got more health and does more damage, but spells have charges, and with Wolf you only get 12 charges, which means you only get to cast it 12 times before you need to recharge it by taking a mana potion. Mana potions recharge all your spells that you have in one draft. So most levels will have a mana potion. Sometimes you'll be lucky and get 2, but mana potions are really precious, because they, without them you can't do a thing. And Wolf is kind of expensive, and obviously at the end of a level, all your wolves, you're going to leave them behind, so you're going to have to start again, on the next level. So, and I upgraded it. You can upgrade also spend SP on upgrading your spells, and I got them pretty good. Wasn't really doing for me, and I bought Fireball just as a fill-in spell, just to kind of do damage when my wolves weren't behaving.
It's a good stopgap, isn't it? A Fireball.
It's a stop.
Old, reliable.
And Fireball has splash damage. It's marvelous. It's wonderful, wonderful spell. But then I saw another.
You've summoned a wolf, Alex.
I did, my own wolf. I'm sorry, everybody. That's Roddy, my Labrador, my retriever dog, my wolf dog. He wants to go outside. He's been sleeping behind me all the way through the pod so far, but he's been roused. I saw this spell, and the interface is actually, like, it looks really crude, but it's got some really smart things on it, because you've got 335 spells. It actually lets you filter by school of magic, so you can very quickly just see all of the fire spells that are available to you at any time so you just go into the character page, and one of them is called Flamegate, and Flamegate sounds cool as fuck. You trigger it, you get 4 charges, trigger it, and then every fire spell that you cast from that point on summons a fire elemental, and they will fight on your behalf. It's a ranged, pretty tough minion, and you can just spam out. You can spam out as many of them as you have fireballs. I didn't read the small print the first time I went into the level. I realized that actually the Flamegate effect only lasts for as long as you keep, for as long as you spend turns casting fire spells. The moment you move or do anything else, move, take a potion or anything like that, the effect ends. So if you're out of position, it will end. Because you need to move into position. If you realize that you haven't got enough charges left on your fireball, you lose the effect. So you've got to trigger it at the right time. But I had this amazing run where I just, on level after level, I was just able to create loads of fire elementals, which just rampaged across the map for me and just dealt with stuff. There are other wrinkles with it as well. The fire elementals, before upgrading them, only last 9 turns, which isn't very long at all. But you can upgrade that. You can nearly double that. All the upgrades, they are meaty upgrades. You almost double their length. You double the amount of damage they do. You double their range. But it feels great just to wreak fiery hell and be repaid with these tough enemies that fight on your behalf. It's extremely good. That run ended after I misclicked. I got to the end of a level, and before picking up everything on the level that I needed and selecting a rift, because I'd run out of health potions and I didn't have many charges left. I needed mana potion. Before finding one of the rifts that did have a mana potion, I clicked accidentally on one of them and boom, went through it and ended up in a level filled with bat dragons. Bat dragons breathe bats at you.
Okay.
Cones of bats, in fact. Like you imagine a kind of, sort of triangle coming out from their cell sort of thing. Of bats, which would be quite good for what I had, because I've got this fireball which did huge splash damage. I could just finish them off in one go, but they're just coming at me, and I was just using up my charges, and it was an ignoble death, and I died. But it's just been like that every time. It's this kind of game where you're browsing the spell list, and then you see, I've just seen a shrine that has such and such an effect, and like lightning and chaos, and by or like a lightning and dark spell, and by doing that, then I get this effect, and you just start building builds in your head, and you just want to try it, and you want to try it, and because you can get to that point quite easily, because the spells that are available to you, you have free access, and you'll always get your 3 SP if you survive a level. All you've got to do is just survive levels, and you can get to the point that you want to with a build, to experiment and try out something new. And it's a really good game.
Is it one of those sort of modular roguelikes where even the enemies have the same sort of spells as you?
Yes, well, they're firing from the same schools.
Can you aspire to the bat cone?
I haven't seen anything that fires bats, but I think there probably should be. There be. There might well be. It's very interesting, isn't it? You'd be in the nature school, I reckon, which is mostly poison stuff. Oh, there's a really nice idea.
Well, I mean, technically, it's like fire breathing, so maybe it's in the fire school, but the fire is bats.
There are some spells where you get to summon dragons as well. Maybe there is a bat dragon among them. Because there are all these upgrades that I've never kind of really browsed because I haven't bought them yet. Because obviously the spells, there are late game spells which cost loads and loads of SP. It's really fun, and it's just so from this hard as nails kind of roguelike description. It is hard as nails, and it is a roguelike, but it's something much more interesting than that might sound. Yeah, I really recommend it. It's a lot of fun, and the creator is it's sort of just piling more and more spells into it. with the and I read an interesting post that he put on Steam that he is concerned that the game will become completely terrifying to any new player because they open the spell book and 300 spells. Like, oh, where the hell do you start?
Yeah.
I mean, even now, like, as a new, it is overwhelming, but because it actually unfurls quite a little bit more sort of accessibly than that, because you can only afford 1 SP spells at the start, and for you're only going to get, for the first two levels, you're going to get a maximum of 6 SP. That's the number of options are actually fairly low at that point. And you're thinking about lots of things. It's crunchy decisions. Like, it is undeniably a good idea to have lots of different spells, because one, it means that your mana potions are going to go further, because this mana potion recharges all your spells. Also, it's good. You're increasingly up against enemies which are completely resistant to any given type of school of magic. But because or do you spend your SP on upgrading what you've already got and making it much more effective later in the game? You need to do a lot of damage because you've got very powerful enemies coming at you. Or do you kind of wait out and hope to get some kind of one of the special shrine effects, which are like skills but only available through shrines? It's really good. I really recommend it.
That sounds really cool. I mean, I always wonder about, especially hard roguelike games. I feel this way about the survival genre as well, where those mechanics, they can breed a certain laziness, I think, because as a designer, you're absolved of actually having like power scaling that works. You're absolved of having a kind of sensible escalation towards some sort of end game. You just have to make things harder and make the players' numbers go down until the game stops. And so when you get a roguelike which really sings, I think that is, that's the sign of a good design chops, because I think it can be a crutch as well.
No, I agree.
When you play this, do you tend to pursue a single strategy per run, or does the kind of restriction on charges mean that you have to swap and completely rebuild halfway through?
I've died before getting to that point, before any. I mean, usually you've really bought into a build. If you've got if you've bought sort of 2 or 3 spells in the early game which don't really work together that well, you're probably not going to survive, to the point where you can afford to try completely different things out. And if you haven't upgraded your spells, they're probably not going to be powerful enough to take into later levels anyway. It doesn't feel like that sort of artificial ramping up of power just to kind of balance out your rising power. It definitely feels more like the stakes are getting higher instead, which is a subtly different feeling, but a more exciting one than simply better rein in the power. The inflation. It feels just more exciting, and a lot of the actual extra danger is actually down to, oh shit, they're immune to dark, so I can't do that tactic that I was using before, or they can do this kind of damage, which I hadn't really figured out about before at this point. It's more interesting than that. Whether it's actually a well-balanced game, I couldn't tell you at this point. What I know is that there are definite builds that have, which are by far the best thing to go for, which I think as a designer I'd be worried about, and probably be putting new spells in to try to counteract, or to add different options, or that might sort of supersede them, or add to the choices you get. But I haven't got to that point yet, and I don't really want to follow any of the guides anyway. I just know that there are some that kind of that are advised. But yeah, at the moment, like I'm about sort of maybe 6 or 7 hours of just playing around with it. I'm just having sort of a lot of fun just trying out stuff. And I don't think I've really even decided to have a proper run at anything yet. It's just sort of like, can I make my fireball and flame gate combo? Can I really make good on it? And I'll always mess up. And like, I've always felt that it's been my fault, which is amazing, actually. You know, I think for a game of the amount of chaos this game like loves to throw at you, you know, it's usually just been me being really dumb, misclicking, or sort of kicking off an effect, and then realizing it was the wrong timing. You know, it's those kinds of things, or not thinking about it, or not watching my health and that kind of thing. Yeah, super good.
What kind
Rift Wizard?
What state is it in? Is it early access technically, or is it fully out?
That's a good question.
It sounds like it's in perpetual development.
Yeah, I think it's it's better seen as a perpetual development game, and it's absolutely playable. I think that the developer is kind of quite pleased with where it is now, and is just trying to see how it might be given additional life through, you know, more updates.
Intriguing. Give me those back cones. That's what I want.
Back cones. We all need back cones.
Should we end it there? Should we go away?
Yeah.
Should we crawl into our beds?
I suppose we ought to. The dog seems to. He might do a wee behind me if we don't stop the pod now. That's all we've got for this pod. Can we reveal what our next off pod is yet, Marsh?
Well, I've sort of given the game away there.
You did, didn't you? Yeah. That's going to be next week. Dune pod. Because the gaming pod is now fortnightly. But yeah, look out for that. We'll return with more gaming insights in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, you can hang out with us in our community on our Discord channel, which is lovely and filled with lovely people. You can find the link to our Discord channel at our website, crateandcrowbar.com. If you have any comments about the new format of the pod, suggestions for content, you might notice that we are not holding questions at the moment. That's because we're thinking about new ways of presenting listener-generated content, because we definitely want you, our listeners, to play a part in our pods. But we're trying to figure out exciting and new ways of doing it. And if you've got good ideas for that or commentary, you can send it to us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. We are on Twitter at Crate and Crowbar. You can also listen to the show on YouTube, youtube.com/Crate and Crowbar. There on our channel, you'll also find our various spin-off projects, which are various, and Marsh stars in a lot of them. The Crate and Crowbar is kindly funded by our Patreon backers. If you'd like to know more about supporting our podcast and its spin-offs, you can visit it at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. And that's it. I've been Alex Wiltshire.
I've been Marsh Davis.
Thanks for listening. Everybody.